Hey y'all, it's Cyber Saloon. So I wanted to go over Sword Art Online Progressive as a series, more so on the novel side. I already gave my thoughts on both the film birth, Aria of a Starless Night and Scared So of Deep Night, and I really enjoyed them both. I kind of want to go over Sword Art Online Progressive as a series as the novels. I've read all of them. I have all 8 of them. They're really good, and I kind of want to go into kind of what I think of the series so far and kind of my hopes of where I want to see the series go, because there's so much more that the series has to offer that Progressive gives us an opportunity to see that we never got to see in the original light novels like 1 and 2, and that we never really got shown in the first season of Sword Art Online that Progressive kind of expands upon. That it has a lot of opportunity here, and I think it's done a really, really good job so far of kind of fleshing out the world of Aincrad. It's given a lot of personality. It's given the world of Aincrad a lot of personality. It's let us see like a lot of different parts of the dungeon itself, and it's gotten, more importantly, where Progressive really shines and why I enjoy it so much is seeing that dynamic between Kirito and Asuna. It's done so well because it is essentially a retelling at the end of the day. You can... How close they are in the novels already, it baffles you, how it didn't come across that way by the time you get to the later floors. And the series does a really, really good job at kind of expanding on that and kind of going into that dynamic that they both have. This isn't so much to go over like what happens in each individual novel. I'll kind of touch on it a little bit, but it's more so to kind of give my thoughts as a whole of where I hope the series kind of goes. Certain things that I like to see, certain elements I kind of want to see be expanded on it, and kind of my hopes for it, as it kind of goes along. So, and like the glimmer of hope that we see for the Assault team, Progressive does a really good job, especially in the first 4 to 5 novels. Specifically about showing us how much of a shit show Aincrad actually was at the beginning, because you remember back in the first couple of light novels and back in the first season where it explains a little bit. It was 2,000 people died before even floor 1 was cleared. You think about it, a lot of people that were in Sword Art Online, you had a good amount of people who probably knew the MMOs pretty well, but there wasn't a lot of people who were logging into it didn't even have that much experience with video games as a whole. Like Asuna, for example. I mean, she mainly played mobile games, and it was kind of coincidence that she ended up logging in the first place. So you have there's a decent amount of people like that who logged in the Sword Art Online, and it kind of gives you that understanding. You see it really in the first. You see it in the first movie where people they're just in a dungeon, and all of a sudden a mob comes along and kills them when Mito and Asuna come across them in the dungeon, and those group of people just end up being just absolutely destroyed in the dungeon. I mean, you see even an Asuna and Mito when they're kind of running away in the field, after Kaiba brings everyone in the circle, that they're kind of running away, and Asuna just nearly gets taken out by a bunch of random direwolves. They literally nearly kill her right there. You kind of understand a little bit how it does a good job in both the first in the novels and the films at showing how chaotic everything is. Every time they cleared a floor, there was always this massive glimmer of hope in everyone's eyes, especially after the first couple of bosses. Hey, this thing's actually doable. You see it in floor 1, floor 2, at the end of Aria of a Starless Night, especially at the end of Scared So of Deep Night, and Rhapsody of Crimson Heat, Cannon of Golden Rule. Every time they beat the boss, it's we can do it. And especially those first couple of bosses, when they beat them, it's this glimmer of hope every time. Hey, the Assault team gets into this rhythm of just clearing the bosses, and they come up with routines and strategies of actually getting it done. And it kind of it shows really well in the novels, and it shows really well in the films as well, about kind of showing how chaotic and unstable the population of Aincrad was at the beginning. You see it especially with Asuna. Asuna has one of the best arcs, if not the best arc in the series, from Aria of a Starless Night in her current arc in Progressive. To go from someone who was just scared all the time and never wanted to leave, to someone who is this determinist, this fatalistic determinism she had, into becoming a confident leader that she ends up becoming. It adds a lot of personality to Aincrad as a setting as well. Because if you remember from the first, like, it explains it in a little bit, like in the first light novel when Heathcliff and like Kirito go into a duel, for example. It doesn't show it more so in the anime because it's like it mainly shows the Colosseum, but like the floor that they're on is like this city of steel, and it's like, oh wow, it's this really cool place that we never get to see in the anime. Like, you think about it, you don't get to see that much of Aincrad. You get to see really bright spots of it in cool places, like when Kirito and Asuna end up buying their little cabin in Floor 22, or like that time that Elizabeth and Kirito go off into that and fight that ice dragon to make that sword. And my favorite one is Selmsburg, that picturesque kind of like town right there on this lake. It's really, super beautiful. But like, Aincrad is a setting it doesn't show too much of. It's like, oh, generic town, like boss floor, dungeon. It gets really repetitive. Not that I hated the first season, but like progressive, like shows how diverse Aincrad is as a setting. Like the third floor is like this water world, and like they got to make they go around on gondolas and do all this this crazy stuff. Like the fifth floor. From Scared So Deep Night is this, it's this, there's ancient ruins everywhere, and like it's like kind of a spooky setting. Like there's like these ghosts, and there's these ancient ruins and like this maze, and it's really, really cool to see each one. Floor 7 from Rhapsody of Crimson Heat is this really cool casino floor. There's vampires, like there's all this crazy shit that exists within Aincrad that gives it a lot of personality. You see that with the NPC quest as well. It's not something you really even thought about watching the first season, but throughout Aincrad are like these actual like deep quest lines that expand multiple floors. It wasn't like that in the beta. Like Kirito kind of explains on it. Like the most prevalent one and the one that's going on the most is the elf storyline with Kimzel and the Dark Elves, and kind of what's going on with that. Like Kimzel, like is a really advanced NPC, and like she ends up like forming a bond with Kirito and Asuna because they decided to help her out, and like she's supposed to like die within the quest line, but she actually doesn't, and she ends up helping them out a lot, and she ends up being super good friends with both Kirito and Asuna. So it kind of expands on the NPC side a little bit. And that alone like gives Aincrad a lot of personality. You see how different each floor was. Like, oh, like there's this water world floor, there's this ice, there's this ice world floor. There's just like there's a desert floor. It's like arid. There's all these different floors, and that kind of it feels like a fantasy world. It feels like what Aincrad that is supposed to feel like, and it gives it a lot of personality. And I think the series does a really, really good job at that. And it's super, super cool. But where Progressive really shines and why I love it so much is it's essentially a retelling of like Kirito and Asuna's story. And it's like a deeper, more like version of like their story. Because in the first season, the first novel, like they meet on the first floor, and then it's like it kind of stops a little bit from there. It never really gets expanded on. You see it when they get to when it gets in the anime. When they get to the Illusionary Avenger and that murder that happens in the town, that's kind of where it takes off, and their relationship kind of takes off. But in the novels, they actually go through a lot of these floors together, and they do like they clear the first floor together, and they stick by each other and still are by each other. And you see, it baffles me because it's odd to me, and here's why. So like in the first couple of novels, like. It seems like by the time they the Illusionary Avenger happens, they're doing the murder mystery. Like then that's when they kind of become friends. Like that connection really isn't there until that happens. But in Progressive, like that connection is has surpassed that. Like it starts out in Art of Starless Night where they're kind of like reluctant acquaintances and they don't really know each other that well. And by the end of the second floor, they're friends. By the end of the third floor, they're really good friends. They're best friends. And you see it in Scared So of Deep Night, and especially in Canon of Golden Rule and Rhapsody, so the 6th and the 7th floors. It is more than that already by this point. You can tell they both, by this point, especially for both of them, you can tell that there's that kind of spark is already there. They both kind of see each other at the beginning part in that way to where they both really care about each other and the starts of that relationship. So I'm confused. This is where it confuses me the most. There's no way, if they're already this close, for those reading, like, they're super close, like, by the time that Rhapsody of Crimson Heat ends. Like, they're inseparable, and they both kind of already have that kernel of they want to be more already by this point. If they're that close already by the 7th floor, I don't think they separate until the 25th, because the 22 was that floor that was kind of a shit show. And a lot of people died. Specifically, the ALS like suffered heavy losses, and they're the ones that go back down to the floor, and they start the army, that really shitty lower guild that kind of runs the town of beginnings. But there's no way by the time they get to floor 22, by the time they separate, that like I don't know how they're even going to separate, because they're so close already by floor 7, and they have so much to go. And if that relationship continues to grow and that friendship continues to grow, I don't understand. Like, it's just like, it doesn't, the anime and the light novels, like, it doesn't make sense that how they treat each other a little bit by the time they meet each other, like in floor, when, my 455 or whatever it is. It's that floor that when the illusionary Avenger happens, and, that whole thing with, Grimlock. But it's like, because they already view each other in that way anyways, and it's beyond obvious, and they're only at floor 7. But the novels do such a great job at showing that dynamic. They just work off so well against each other because they both had great arcs. Like, Progressive is so fun, and I love watching it because of how far they've already gone with each character. Asuna has the best arc in the entire series. Like, she's a better character in Progressive than it's made me. I already thought she was a great character anyways. But Progressive has made her such a great character. She goes from someone who is just scared, doesn't know what they're doing, to depressed all the time at the town of beginnings, to someone who's like has this fatalistic determinism to die fighting, to when Kirito kind of finds her and gives her like a chance again on life, and she ends up becoming this extremely confident like leader in this symbol that everyone looks to, because she's so good at not only is she one of the best people on the assault team, but she's also like this great leader that everyone and symbol that kind of everyone looks to. And Kirito kind of go. Asuna serves as his emotional link to Kirito, where he's just this survivalist kind of a super isolated personality, to growing a little bit more out of his shell and kind of viewing people and kind of wanting to help them more. It does such a good job at showing that. I'm so excited to see where each of those characters go. My hopes for the series and kind of things that I want to see happen in the series are expanded on. The first one is Laughing Coffin. They've done such a good job at sowing those seeds of Laughing Coffin and Progressive with Poe, with Morte, and some of the other members that are there right now. And because Laughing Coffin is such a great element from Sword Art Online, that I'm glad it gets expanded on a little bit in Season 2 and Season 3 with Poe, that I really enjoyed. A gang of serial killers running around like in a world like that, killing people, was something that always I wish they'd explored more, because you see it in Scared So Deep Night specifically about how dangerous they can be, because they have members that are already part of guilds, and they're trying to get guilds and people to kill each other, because they don't ever want the game to escape. And they have these really clever ways of talking to each other. Well, they'll write on instead of sending each other messages about killing people or their plans, they'll write it down on notes, so that if the game does get completed, there's no evidence that they did what they did. And it's really, really cool. And it's like, again, Poe is so, that scene in Scared So Deep Night at the end when like Poe is like running towards Asuna and Kirito and takes him, is so good, because it shows you how like terrifying like Laughing Coffin is as a group. And like Asuna and Kirito are like the top 1% of players. Like, it's just like, if you're some like mid or low level player, like you're just easy prey, and there's no way you're going to escape. So I really hope that it kind of shows that like the Laughing Coffin kind of sowing those seeds of discord more, not just throughout the guilds, but showing like how terrifying of a presence they end up being. And especially my main hope is when the assault team specifically takes them out in the raid. We already see in Sword Art Online Season 2 about how like it gives Kirito a little bit of PTSD because he killed 3 of them, and he did while it's obviously justified, he killed 3 serial killers and murderers. It still kind of wears on him that he killed 3 people as a teenager, and he did at the end of the day. And kind of like after that raid, how each person kind of feels, because even when it showed it in the anime and talks about it in the light novels, you can tell it was something that it was a hard thing to do. And it's ironic because Poe's the one who even gave him up in the first place because he was just trying to fuck with Kirito, basically. But it's so well done, and I hope they expand that more, and it seems like they will as well. The main thing I really want to see from Progressive is how the split between Kirito and Asuna. So here's how I think it's going to go down. So we know that at floor 22, it's one of the lower, I think it's floor 22, they get massacred. Like, the ALS gets absolutely massacred. I think it's because he got fed false information about a boss, and most of the ALS just ends up getting creamed. And a lot of the assault team gets wiped out as a result of this. And so they just end up leaving. And, like, it's this boss battle that just, because so many people died in it, it's like they got into a good rhythm of clearing the game, and like the assault team was this glimmer of hope in everyone's eyes that this is our way out. Like, we just keep doing this for 100 floors and we're just going to clear the game. And then the game starts getting harder, and then the bosses start getting harder. And so by the time floor 22 comes around, they get to a point where, like, oh, we actually have to rethink this. We can't do it anymore. And people get a little bit more dour. So how that split happens between Asuna and Kirito, because here's how I see it going down. Because they're so close at this point. Asuna has, like, it's even mentioned in one of the novels that, like, hey, like, you should be, like, you should end up leading one of the major guilds. And Asuna shoots it down because she's like, well, she says, like, oh, I got to watch over here, but she just doesn't want to leave him at the end of the day. I think how the split's going to happen is that they're just going to get absolutely boofed on the floor boss at 22, and you're going to kind of start to see a little bit of strain on both of them because Kirito knows that they're not going to be able to keep their party going forever, and that Asuna is going to have to be that symbol and that leader that the game and everyone in it needs her to be. And I think by the time floor 25 comes around, because I think that's when she gets recruited by Heathcliff, I think it's going to go down as Kirito is going to, like, it's going to be interesting how that kind of happens. If Heathcliff is going to be the one to initiate that split and kind of persuade Asuna, or if it's going to be Kirito to kind of persuade Asuna that we can't do this anymore. Like, we're never going to beat the game if it's just you and me doing what we're doing now. Like, the guilds are never going, no one's ever going to be united. The assault team is never going to be as good. Like, you have to leave and you have to go, like, help out Heathcliff with Knights of the Blood Oath. And that's kind of how I see it going down. I think it's going to be kind of bitter. I think it's going to be hard on both of them. And I think Kirito's probably going to have to pretend, like, and come across more so like he wants it to happen, but internally he's like, shit, I don't want to do this more than anything in the world. That's kind of how I see it going down. I see it, it's probably going to go down in a fight as well. I can see it being a major point of contention between both of them. But I think that they'll be able to come to reasoning and kind of, and Austin's going to end up having to go without too much bones. But again, by the way she kind of treats him, when he gets to the later floors, that they want to keep consistency, he might have to initiate it where, like, oh, I just don't want to be in a party with you anymore, and might have to just lie through his teeth. And Austin's going to know he's lying through his teeth, and she's just going to stay mad at him for it. But it is going to be interesting when they split, because again, if you highly recommend reading the novels. Again, they're great. But if by the time you if they're only on floor 7, they just completed floor 7. They're so inseparable at this point. They're so close. And if that growth continues, I don't understand. It's gonna be interesting to see how they both kind of split up in the end by floor 25. Because they're so close at this point. I see it going down in a bad way. Like, is it just that they got super close, inseparable, and then that flame kind of burns out? Does Asuna just get mad that he initiated the split? It'll be interesting to see how it goes down. I'm really excited to see how that split kind of goes down. I want to see Kirito a little bit more after the Moonlit Black Cats. I think that's something that'd be really cool to be expanded on. Kind of his mindset, like, after that, like when they all die and the leader kind of jumps off and kills himself, like how that affects him on the front lines. Does he stay off the front lines for a while, or is he just does he end up like Asuna, where he just doesn't give a shit anymore? Because he's watched people that he's been close to just die. And he just has that. Does he go through like a phase that Asuna did a little bit later during the game, where he's just on the front lines, just going ham, just doesn't give a shit his HP bars in the red for a time, because he just he gets into that fatalistic, deterministic attitude that Asuna had in floor 1, to where he just doesn't give a shit anymore. Well, where everyone's gonna die anyways, and it's just whatever. Because you kind of see him go through it in the episode, in the 4th episode, and his 3rd or 4th. I think it's 3rd. I think it is 3rd. When the Moonlit Black Cats die, and you see it again in light novel, like he's just so he's messed up mentally, even after for months and a while after they die, puts a lot of blame on himself. So I really wanted to expand on like how his personality and kind of the shit he goes through after the Moonlit Black Cats die. I really want them to expand on Asuna's early days in the Knights of the Blood Oath, like how specifically, like I want to see her go through like kind of hard times, and this is why like does she go through any floor bosses, or are there anything that happens that like how when they're going through a floor raid, and like does she make a decision where someone ends up dying because of it, like, or is there something that just happens she has no control of, but someone ends up dying under her command, and is that something she gets used to? The burdens of command, like especially in a setting like that, to where it's like that responsibility of her going from just teaming up with Kirito to actually being over like a lot of people and being responsible for their lives, and that burden of kind of managing people, kind of how that affects her, and kind of how that grows her as a person. Kind of that early relationship between Heathcliff and Asuna, how Asuna and Heathcliff kind of get off, off one another. Like how does Asuna view Heathcliff, and how does Heathcliff kind of treat Asuna? Is he like a micromanager, or is she good enough to where he just doesn't even question shit? Like he's just like extremely hands off. Do what you want to do. That relationship between Heathcliff and Asuna is going to be really interesting to see, and kind of again seeing Asuna kind of find that footing of command, of like leading people and like being responsible not just for Knights of the Blood Oath, but she's basically the commander of the assault team, because we see in a little bit in the later when Kirito and Asuna run into each other in the anime and the light novels that like Heathcliff is there, like he sometimes comes on raids, but it's not like all the time. He kind of just leaves it to Asuna. So like her not only just being responsible for like the Knights of the Blood, but also being responsible for like a lot of the other people who serve under Knights of the Blood because of their strongest skill, and she has to be one of the main leaders, if not the main leader for the assault team, and kind of watching her, that confidence grow, and kind of watching her like mature as a person to like being over as many people as she was. And kind of like, how do they think about each other? And I feel like they do. Like, this is what I mean. That's why it feels like a retelling, because it doesn't make sense that they treat each other the way they did in the anime and the light novels by the time they see each other, because just like they were so close and inseparable they're only in floor 7 now. So it's just by the time that they split up, there's no way they don't think about each other at this point, because they already view each other in a more than best friends kind of like way. They definitely both view each other romantically at this point. It's obvious from Kirito and Asuna. Like there's a scene in I think it's book 5 where like Asuna thinks that Kirito, like it's either Scherzo or it's Canon of Golden Rule. I think it's Canon of Golden Rule, where like Kirito's about to talk to her about P-Kang, and like Asuna thinks that he's gonna like tell her that he likes her, and she's holding this pillow close, and it's adorable. And there's a scene, I really like this one. There's a scene in Rhapsody of Crimson Heat where like they finally get their room in the casino, and like Asuna just like goes to like look outside the balcony, and Kirito's just like enamored by like how gorgeous she is, and it's just like, it's what I mean. It's like they kind of view each other in that way already. But it's more of a retelling than an explanation. Like it's like, oh, like and there, here's the thing too, like it makes those scenes in the light novels, and it makes those scenes, especially in the anime, hit different. Like if you think about Progressive as a series, like and that like how much more they've been through than just the anime, it makes you like in the light novels, it makes that scene especially at the end of season 1, the first time that they meet and that he gets Asuna out. That moment hits a lot harder, and all the moments that they have hit a lot harder because just through how much shit that they've been and how much it gets elaborated on here. So that's why I love it so much. This series, it enriches the setting so much, and it enriches both Kirito and Asuna so much to where it's just a better story. Reki's done such a good job with it, and that's why I'm super excited to kind of see where it ends up going. And I definitely hope that they go in that a little bit more. Some of the other minor things I want them to show as well, and some of the other guilds, like what after the ALS leaves, like kind of how some of the other bigger guilds kind of rise up, and the politics that kind of go on in that, because we kind of get to see it. Progressive's done a really good job on expanding of that, like the formation of the guilds, how they kind of work with each other. And does a really good job of, kind of explaining like how they work to one another, and they kind of beat off each other, like they're really competitive against one another. But as they end up growing more powerful, especially by the time you get to Knights of the Blood Oath, like keeping other guilds in check and making sure they're not running around doing dumb shit. So I really want them to go on that as well, and especially like some of the minor characters. I hope they go into a little bit more of Aegil. Aegil's a really cool character, so I hope him and Klein get some love in the series as well. And I definitely want to see like Austin and Elizabeth, like because we see by the time that in the first episode when but by the time Kirito meets her in the shop, like her and Elizabeth are like best friends. So kind of how like she started her shop, and it goes in a little bit more of that. But Progressives, the series is great. It adds so much, it acts as a prequel that enriches the setting so much, and it does such a good job. At explaining that dynamic and kind of enriching Kirito and Asuna's characters and maturing them a little bit more. So I'm really excited to see where it goes. I highly recommend it if you've never read Progressive. I highly recommend it. And you love Sword Art Online, especially the Ironclad stuff. If you really enjoyed season 1, maybe didn't dig season 2, but really enjoyed season 3. I think it's something that you would really enjoy. I would highly recommend it. It does a really good job at explaining early Ironclad and does a lot of really great things, expanding on the setting itself and kind of expanding on both Kirito and Asuna and maturing them and growing them as characters to where it makes them a little bit deeper. So I'd highly recommend it. Those who've read it, let me kind of know in the comments below if there are certain things that you want to see. Those are just the main things that I kind of want to see. So specifically the split, like I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting for the novel when everyone just gets massacred. I know that sounds bad, but it's, they've been doing so well at this point. It's gonna be nice to kind of see like what happens when they go through a shit show. But that's all I got for this one, guys. I think maybe next week I might kind of go over the first season of Sword Art Online. But again, if you haven't checked out Progressive, I'd highly recommend it. And if you have read it, just let me know what you kind of want to see from it in the comments. All right, y'all. I'll see you on the next one.